The holographic display flickered with damning certainty across the sterile chamber of the Galactic Classification Authority. 37 species had gathered for what should have been routine bureaucracy, a simple planetary downgrade that would strip Earth of its emerging civilization status and reclassify it as a backwater irrelevancy. The data seemed undeniable. Humanity's space presence remained pathetically limited, their planet scarred by endless conflicts, their technology advancing at glacial speeds compared to galactic standards. Senior Administrator Vexithani of the Corvashi hegemony tapped her crystalline claws against the obsidian table, her compound eyes scanning the preliminary reports with practiced indifference. The hexagonal chamber stretched 30 meters across, its walls lined with quantum-hardened displays showing the slow rotation of 17,000 catalogued worlds. Above them, the Nexus core hummed with the accumulated knowledge of 43 distinct civilizations, each represented by delegates whose ancestors had transcended the primitive limitations that apparently still bound humanity to their single world. "Classification downgrade appears warranted," Vexthani announced in the universal tongue, her translator rendering the words with clinical precision. "Species designation, Homo sapiens. Current status, emerging civilization, level 4. Proposed downgrade, primitive backwater, level 1. Her voice carried the weight of bureaucratic finality that had sealed the fates of countless species across the galaxy. Around the chamber, representatives barely lifted their various appendages in acknowledgement. This was tedium incarnate, the kind of administrative housekeeping that kept the galaxy's bureaucratic machinery grinding forward through the endless cycles of evaluation, classification, and control. The Zenthari delegates' 6 arms wove patterns of board agreement. The Draconi representative's scaled head nodded with imperial indifference. The crystalline Vorthak simply pulsed with pale disinterest. Earth's fate was sealed before the meeting had truly begun, but in the depths of the facility, 3 levels below the main assembly chamber, junior analyst Corvin Thaxmek was discovering something that would shatter their complacency forever. His workstation occupied a cramped alcove in sub-level C, surrounded by the humming processors that handled routine data verification for thousands of planetary assessments. The walls around him glowed with scrolling text in 17 different languages, each stream representing another world's evaluation metrics flowing through the classification authority's vast analytical networks. Corvin had always possessed an unfortunate talent for noticing discrepancies, a trait that kept him perpetually assigned to the most mind-numbing data verification tasks the authority could devise. His superiors considered this a punishment. Corvin had learned to see it as an opportunity to dig deeper than anyone else bothered to look. His 4 primary optical sensors processed information at rates that impressed even Zenthari cognitive specialists, while his auxiliary neural clusters identified patterns that escaped standard analytical protocols. Today, those same capabilities were focused on Earth's files, with the methodical precision of a surgeon examining a potentially malignant growth. The human files lay scattered across his workstation in holographic splendor, each chart and graph telling the same story of stagnation and decline, population growth curves that flattened ominously, energy consumption patterns that suggested resource depletion, military expenditures focused on primitive kinetic weapons rather than energy-based systems, communications networks that relied on electromagnetic radiation instead of quantum entanglement. Everything pointed to a species trapped in its own limitations, destined for irrelevance or extinction. The orbital surveillance data painted a picture of barely controlled chaos, cities sprawling without apparent planning, transportation networks that defied logical efficiency, industrial zones scattered seemingly at random across continents. Their space program consisted of chemical rockets that could barely escape planetary gravity, space stations that required constant resupply, and exploration efforts that hadn't ventured beyond their immediate solar neighborhood in over half a century. Yet as Corvin's secondary analysis routines processed the raw data, anomalies began to surface like bubbles in stagnant water. The first was subtle, a statistical variance in human birth rates that didn't match any known biological pattern. Most species followed predictable reproductive cycles tied to resource availability or environmental pressures. The Corvashi increased reproduction during periods of territorial expansion. The Zenthari synchronized breeding with stellar radiation cycles. The Draconi followed complex hierarchical patterns based on social dominance. Humans seemed to defy this logic, with birth rate fluctuations that appeared almost orchestrated. The mathematical probability of such patterns occurring naturally fell well below statistical significance, yet there they were, consistent across multiple continents and centuries. Corvin's mandibles clicked nervously as he ran the calculations a third time, hoping to find an error in his analysis. The patterns held. Whatever was influencing human reproduction, it wasn't natural selection or environmental pressure. It was something far more systematic and intentional. The second anomaly proved more disturbing. Energy consumption data that contained systematic gaps. Not the random holes you'd expect from primitive monitoring systems, but carefully structured emissions that suggested someone was deliberately hiding massive power draws from orbital observation. The gaps appeared in precise intervals, lasting exactly the length of time required for major industrial processes to complete full operational cycles. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental, too sophisticated to be accidental. Corvin's secondary processes cross-referenced the gaps with astronomical data, searching for natural phenomena that might explain the power consumption blackouts. What he found made his exoskeleton shiver with implications that defied every assumption about human capability. The missing energy signatures aligned perfectly with periods when Earth experienced unusual atmospheric ionization, the kind that would naturally scramble long-range sensors and create dead zones in orbital monitoring. But the ionization events weren't natural. They were artificially generated by ground-based installations using technology that shouldn't exist in human civilization. The mathematical precision required to create such atmospheric effects demanded not only advanced particle physics, but also planetary-scale coordination that implied a level of organizational sophistication that contradicted every other aspect of human society. "Fascinating," he muttered in his native Zelanti, a language his workstation's translator couldn't parse. The word felt inadequate for the growing unease that crept through his exoskeleton like ice water through crystal matrices. He opened a priority channel to the archives, requesting access to extended surveillance records on Sol's system. The files that materialized around his workstation contained enough data to occupy entire research teams for years. Electromagnetic emissions dating back 8 centuries. Gravitational anomaly records spanning 4 millennia. Spectral analysis of human technology that revealed inconsistencies in metallurgy, energy production, and materials science that suggested capabilities far beyond official assessments. But buried within the massive data archives, Corvin discovered references that defied every assumption the Council had made about human development and galactic contact protocols. What he found defied every assumption the Council had made about human capability. The official first contact protocols indicated initial observation had begun merely 3 centuries ago, when human electromagnetic emissions first reached sufficient strength to attract galactic attention. Standard procedure for any emerging species: monitor from distance, assess development trajectory, intervene only if they posed a threat or showed exceptional promise. Earth had been classified as neither. The monitoring reports painted a picture of a species struggling with internal conflicts, environmental degradation, and technological limitations that prevented them from achieving even basic interplanetary travel. Their radio emissions consisted primarily of entertainment broadcasts, commercial communications, and primitive military coordination. Their space-based activities were limited to simple satellites and occasional manned missions that barely scratched the surface of their solar system's potential. By every measure the Council used to evaluate emerging civilizations, humanity appeared destined for either slow extinction or centuries of struggle before achieving basic spacefaring capability. But buried in the classified xenoarchaeology files, accessible only through administrative privileges that Corvin technically possessed but had never thought to use, he discovered references to human artifacts that predated official contact by millennia. Stone carvings in remote locations that depicted star charts with impossible accuracy, showing stellar positions that could only be determined through advanced astronomical observation. Ancient texts describing beings from the sky with technology that matched known alien species with disturbing precision. Cave paintings that showed spacecraft designs identical to Corvashi exploration vessels that had operated in the region 5,000 years earlier. Most disturbing of all, genetic markers in isolated human populations that suggested exposure to controlled stellar radiation, the kind used in advanced spacecraft propulsion systems. The biological evidence was undeniable. Humans had been in direct contact with spacefaring technology for thousands of years before official first contact protocols had even been established. The implications struck Corvin like a plasma bolt to his primary consciousness centers. If humans had been in contact with galactic civilization for thousands of years longer than officially recorded, then every assumption about their development trajectory was fundamentally flawed. More terrifying still was the possibility that this contact had been hidden not by alien directive, but by human choice. The xenoarchaeology reports contained references to multiple failed contact attempts, each one apparently terminated by human action rather than alien withdrawal. Species after species had attempted to establish permanent contact with Earth, only to find their representatives vanishing without trace, their technologies somehow neutralized, and their missions classified as failures due to primitive hostile response. Yet the evidence suggested something far more sophisticated than primitive hostility. Each failed contact attempt had resulted in subtle changes to human technology and social organization, as if they were systematically acquiring and adapting alien knowledge while maintaining the appearance of isolation. The pattern suggested not primitive fear of the unknown, but calculated exploitation of alien resources combined with masterful deception about their true capabilities. He initiated a deep archive search for any mention of Earth in military intelligence databases, knowing that such access would trigger security protocols that might end his career. But the growing certainty that something fundamentally wrong with official human assessments overrode his professional caution. The results painted a picture that transformed his scientific curiosity into existential dread. Over the past 2 centuries, 17 different alien species had attempted covert influence operations on Earth. 17 separate attempts to guide human development, manipulate their political systems, or acquire strategic resources from their world. Not a single one had succeeded. The failure rate defied statistical probability and suggested systematic countermeasures that exceeded anything in the galactic database. The Kitharian Syndicate had tried to manipulate human financial systems in 1847, using economic disruption patterns that had successfully destabilized 12 other emerging civilizations. Their carefully crafted market manipulations had been absorbed and redirected with impossible sophistication, turning their own strategies against them and generating massive financial losses that had contributed to the syndicate's eventual political collapse. The Vraxi Collective had attempted to introduce technological blueprints through human inventors in the early 20th century, following protocols that had successfully advanced 17 other species towards spacefaring capability. But their agents had simply vanished, not killed, not captured, but vanished so completely that even quantum tracking signatures disappeared. Post-mission analysis revealed no evidence of violence or detection, simply the total erasure of alien presence from human society. Most recently, the hegemony itself had tried to influence human political systems through carefully placed neural implants in key leaders, using technology that had successfully controlled government policies on 43 different worlds. The implants had functioned perfectly for exactly 72 hours before mysteriously deactivating. Post-mission analysis revealed they had been neutralized by an unknown countermeasure that left no trace of its existence, while somehow preserving the implanted individual's memories of the entire experience. The human leaders had not only detected and neutralized advanced alien technology, but had done so while allowing the aliens to believe their mission was proceeding normally until the moment of complete failure. Corvin's breathing apparatus cycled rapidly as the full scope of the pattern became clear. Every covert operation had failed, not through human luck or incompetence, but through what could only be described as superior preparation. As if Earth's inhabitants had known exactly what was coming and had developed specific countermeasures in advance. The level of intelligence gathering and technological sophistication required to consistently defeat alien operations suggested capabilities that rivaled or exceeded those of established galactic civilizations. Yet somehow, humans had managed to maintain the illusion of primitive isolation while systematically neutralizing every attempt at alien intervention. The mathematics of such consistent success were impossible to explain through conventional analysis. Either humans possessed intelligence networks that had infiltrated every major galactic civilization, or they had developed predictive capabilities that allowed them to anticipate alien operations before they were even planned. His workstation chimed with an incoming priority alert, new data from the orbital monitoring stations. Corvin's optical sensors focused on the transmission with growing horror as the implications of real-time surveillance data conflicted with every established assumption about human capabilities. The humans had just launched what appeared to be a routine communications satellite from their primary space facility. The launch had been announced weeks in advance through normal human media channels, described as a standard replacement for aging telecommunications infrastructure. Orbital observation had confirmed the launch vehicle matched known human rocket designs, following trajectory patterns consistent with their established technological limitations. Except the launch trajectory was all wrong for Earth orbit. The satellite's final position would place it at the edge of human solar system, far beyond the range of their supposed propulsion technology. The energy signature during launch had exceeded the theoretical maximum output of human chemical rockets by orders of magnitude, suggesting power sources that officially didn't exist in their civilization. Most disturbing of all, the quantum resonance patterns detected during orbital insertion suggested the satellite was equipped with faster-than-light communication capabilities that represented technology centuries beyond anything in human scientific databases. The monitoring station's analysis was unambiguous. Humans had just deployed interstellar communication technology while maintaining the facade of primitive orbital operations. Corvin stared at the data streaming across his displays, each new detail adding weight to a conclusion he desperately wanted to reject. The satellite's trajectory would place it at the edge of human solar system, positioned perfectly to monitor approaches from the galactic core. Its communication array was sophisticated enough to maintain real-time contact with Earth across interstellar distances using quantum entanglement protocols that matched the most advanced alien technologies. Most terrifying of all, spectral analysis revealed construction materials that could only have been created using industrial processes beyond anything in humanity's publicly acknowledged technological arsenal. The satellite's hull composition included exotic alloys that required particle accelerators and zero-gravity manufacturing facilities that didn't exist in any known human installation. Its power source generated readings consistent with antimatter containment systems that represented technology the Council reserved for its most advanced military applications. The communication systems employed quantum mechanics applications that suggested theoretical understanding of physics that humanity's published scientific literature claimed was still decades away from practical implementation. This wasn't the desperate gambit of a primitive species reaching for the stars. This was the calculated deployment of advanced technology by a civilization that had been hiding its true capabilities for centuries. The precision of the launch, the sophistication of the technology, and the strategic positioning of the satellite suggested planning and preparation that spanned generations. Every aspect of the operation had been designed to appear primitive to casual observation, while concealing capabilities that challenged the technological supremacy of established galactic civilizations. As Corvin compiled his preliminary report, his hands trembled against the haptic interfaces with the recognition that he was documenting the greatest intelligence failure in galactic history. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same impossible conclusion. The Council hadn't been observing an emerging civilization. They had been unknowingly monitored by one that might be their equal or their superior. The scope of human deception suggested organizational capabilities and strategic thinking that exceeded anything in the historical records. They had maintained the illusion of primitive limitation while secretly developing technologies that could threaten the established order of the galaxy. They had allowed themselves to be dismissed as insignificant while positioning themselves to challenge the fundamental assumptions about galactic civilization. And if they had succeeded in hiding this much, what else were they concealing? The question haunted every aspect of Corvin's analysis. If humans could conceal advanced space technology, what other capabilities remained hidden? If they could neutralize alien influence operations, what offensive capabilities might they possess? If they could maintain such sophisticated deception for centuries, what were their ultimate intentions? He opened a secure channel to Senior Administrator Vexisthani, knowing that what he was about to report would send shockwaves through every level of galactic government. The humans weren't primitive at all. They had been performing the greatest deception in recorded history, allowing themselves to be perceived as backward while secretly developing capabilities that could threaten the established order of the galaxy. Corvin's report began with 3 words that would haunt the Council's nightmares. We were wrong. The implications of those words would reshape galactic politics, military strategy, and diplomatic relations in ways that none of them could yet imagine. In the depths of space, Earth's new satellite silently assumed position at the edge of the solar system, its sensors turning toward the galactic core with mechanical precision. On its hull, barely visible to even the most sophisticated scanning equipment, was etched a simple message in ancient human script. We know you're watching. But that message was only the beginning. Hidden within the satellite's quantum communication array was a second message, encrypted in a code that no alien civilization had ever encountered. Phase 1 complete. Initiate Phase 2 on my mark. Across the galaxy, other satellites, launched years earlier under the same pretense of primitive technology, received the signal and began activating systems that had remained dormant for decades. The age of human concealment was ending. The age of human revelation was about to begin, and the galaxy was completely unprepared for what humanity was about to unveil. The emergency session convened within hours of Corvin's report reaching the upper echelons of the classification authority. Senior Administrator Vexithani found herself facing a crisis that challenged every fundamental assumption about galactic civilization, standing before the Council's most senior representatives in a chamber that had witnessed the rise and fall of entire species. The sterile conference chamber, normally reserved for the most critical threats to galactic security, hummed with nervous energy as representatives from major Council species materialized via quantum link hologram. The chamber's quantum-hardened walls could withstand direct assault from antimatter weapons, yet the information they were about to discuss threatened to be far more destructive than any physical attack. Above them, the holographic representation of known space rotated slowly, its 17,000 catalogued worlds suddenly seeming vulnerable to a threat none of them had anticipated. Fleet Admiral Zaros Keltherin of the Draconian Imperium materialized first, his scaled features set in the grim expression that had intimidated rebellious systems for over 4 centuries. His massive frame, enhanced by military augmentations that made him equally deadly in personal combat or strategic planning, dominated the chamber's central area. Behind him, tactical displays showed the positions of Draconi fleets throughout the galaxy, their formations optimized for rapid deployment against conventional threats. None of those formations had been designed to counter an enemy that had been studying them for centuries while remaining completely hidden. "Explain to me," his voice resonated through the chamber's acoustic dampeners with the authority of someone who had personally conquered 47 star systems, "how an entire species has been deceiving us for the better part of a millennium." Director Yithara of Zenthari Intelligence flickered into existence beside him, her 6-armed form weaving complex patterns of skepticism that had become her trademark during centuries of intelligence work. Her neural implants glowed with the constant flow of data from intelligence networks that spanned the galaxy, networks that had apparently failed to detect the greatest deception in recorded history. The crystalline structures embedded in her cranial ridges pulsed with calculations that processed threat assessments faster than most species could think, yet those same capabilities had somehow missed clear evidence of human capabilities. The preliminary data suggests systematic misdirection on an unprecedented scale. Her voice carried the professional precision of someone who had spent 3 centuries analyzing alien civilizations. If accurate, this represents the most sophisticated espionage operation in galactic history. Around the chamber, other representatives materialized as quantum links established connections across interstellar distances. Ambassador Tekvar of the Korvashi hegemony brought with him the authority of a species that had mastered space travel when most current council members were still developing agriculture. High Counselor Vrexthai of the Vorthak Collective represented crystalline beings whose technological mastery had remained unchallenged for over 2 millennia. Each delegate brought the accumulated wisdom and resources of civilizations that had dominated galactic politics for longer than humanity had possessed written language. Yet they were gathered to discuss how a supposedly primitive species had outmaneuvered them all. Vexithani activated the central holographic display, Earth rotating slowly in perfect detail above the obsidian table. The planet appeared deceptively serene from orbital distances, its blue oceans and green continents masking whatever technological marvels lay hidden beneath the carefully maintained facade of primitive limitation. Junior analyst Thaxmek's investigation has revealed anomalies in virtually every aspect of our human assessment, she announced with the gravity of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. What we interpreted as primitive limitation appears to have been calculated deception. The evidence streamed across their shared visual interface with damning clarity that forced every delegate to confront the scope of their intelligence failure. Human settlements that appeared randomly distributed from orbital observation but formed precise geometric patterns when viewed from specific angles in space. The patterns weren't accidental. They were mathematical constructs that suggested sophisticated urban planning designed to conceal true purpose while maintaining functional efficiency. Agricultural zones that seemed inefficient until analyzed as carefully disguised industrial complexes, their crop patterns actually concealing manufacturing facilities that could produce advanced technologies without detection from orbital surveillance. Transportation networks that made no economic sense unless their true purpose was rapid military deployment, with highways and rail systems positioned to move massive amounts of personnel and equipment across continents within hours rather than days. Look at this. Vexathani highlighted specific data points with her claw extensions, her voice carrying the horror of professional recognition. Human highways crisscross their continents in patterns that perfectly match optimal defensive positioning for repelling orbital assault. Their major population centers are positioned at precisely the coordinates that would maximize survival in the event of planet-wide bombardment. The tactical implications struck the assembled delegates like physical blows. The humans hadn't built their civilization for comfort or efficiency. They had constructed it as a fortress designed to survive and counter threats from space. Every city was positioned to provide mutual support during siege operations. Every transportation network was designed for rapid evacuation or military mobilization. Even their agricultural systems were positioned to continue food production during extended orbital bombardment. Fleet Admiral Keltharin's eyes narrowed as he processed the tactical implications with the professional expertise of someone who had spent 4 centuries planning and executing interstellar military campaigns. His neural implants accessed military databases that contained strategic analyses of every known spacefaring civilization, yet none of those analyses had prepared him for evidence of defensive preparation on this scale. You're suggesting they've been preparing for invasion for centuries. The question carried implications that challenged every assumption about human motivations and capabilities. If humanity had been preparing for invasion, it implied they had known about galactic civilization long enough to understand its military capabilities and develop appropriate countermeasures. It suggested intelligence-gathering operations that had penetrated Council security without detection. Most disturbing of all, it implied strategic thinking that had anticipated conflicts on timescales that exceeded the planning horizons of most galactic civilizations. Director Ythara's manipulator arms danced across holographic interfaces, pulling up intelligence files that painted an even more disturbing picture of systematic human preparation. Her access to classified databases revealed layers of information that had been dismissed as irrelevant by previous analysts, but now formed a pattern of calculated deception that spanned centuries. Cross-referencing with our diplomatic archives reveals additional anomalies, she announced with the professional calm that had characterized her analysis of thousands of potential threats over her long career. Every time we've attempted to establish preliminary contact protocols, human responses have been unusual. The chamber fell silent as she displayed recorded communications from attempted first contact scenarios spanning the past 3 centuries. In each case, human governments had responded to alien signals with perfect protocol knowledge, not the confused panic expected from a species encountering galactic civilization for the first time, but practiced diplomatic responses that suggested intimate familiarity with interstellar contact procedures. The responses had been so smooth, so professional, that previous analysts had dismissed them as evidence of exceptional human adaptability rather than prior knowledge. But viewed in the context of systematic deception, those same responses revealed preparation that could only have come from extensive study of galactic diplomatic procedures. They knew exactly what we were going to say before we said it, Ythara continued, her tone carrying the weight of professional alarm that had characterized her most serious threat assessments. Their countersignals employed diplomatic codes that shouldn't exist in their civilization. They responded to trade inquiries with resource assessments that required technologies they allegedly don't possess. Admiral Keltherin leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the display as his strategic mind processed implications that challenged every assumption about galactic security. Are you telling me that every human leader we've attempted to contact has been briefed on galactic diplomatic protocol? The question carried implications that went far beyond diplomatic preparation. If human leaders possessed knowledge of galactic procedures, it suggested intelligence networks that had somehow accessed classified council information without detection. I'm suggesting something far more troubling, Yuthara replied, with the measured precision of someone delivering intelligence that would reshape galactic policy. I believe they wrote those protocols. The implication hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud, its ramifications spreading through every aspect of galactic governance and security. If humans had influenced the development of galactic diplomatic procedures, then their apparent isolation was a masterpiece of strategic deception that had been generations in the making. They hadn't been excluded from galactic civilization. They had been manipulating it from the shadows while maintaining the perfect illusion of primitive limitation. The scope of such an operation suggested organizational capabilities that exceeded anything in the galactic database. It implied strategic thinking that operated on timescales beyond the planning horizons of most established civilizations. Most terrifying of all, it suggested that humanity's emergence into galactic politics was not the beginning of their involvement, but the end of their concealment phase. Vexitani pulled up additional files that confirmed their worst fears about the scope and sophistication of human intelligence operations. Linguistic analysis of human fiction reveals detailed knowledge of 17 different alien species, including accurate descriptions of their biology, technology, and social structures, she announced with the gravity of someone presenting evidence of the greatest intelligence failure in galactic history. They call these science fiction stories and claim they're imaginary. She paused, allowing the weight of revelation to settle across the assembled delegates like a shroud of recognition. The accuracy rate is 97%. The mathematics were impossible to ignore, representing a level of precision that could only be achieved through systematic intelligence-gathering operations spanning centuries. Human fiction contained detailed technical specifications for faster-than-light travel that matched known galactic technologies with uncanny precision. Their stories described energy weapon systems that mirrored classified military technologies with accuracy that exceeded the knowledge of most council species. They depicted artificial intelligence architectures that perfectly matched classified research projects that had never been publicly disclosed. Their entertainment described alien worlds they had allegedly never seen with geographical and atmospheric details that matched classified survey reports. They portrayed political systems they couldn't have encountered with accuracy that suggested intimate familiarity with governmental structures that were carefully guarded state secrets. They depicted military tactics that perfectly countered known strategic doctrines with sophistication that suggested extensive wargaming and analysis by professional strategic planners. They've been studying us. Admiral Keltharin's voice carried the growl of a predator recognizing another apex hunter. For centuries, maybe millennia, everything they've written, every story they've told, has been reconnaissance data disguised as entertainment. The scope of the intelligence operation defied comprehension. Human fiction represented the largest collection of accurate alien intelligence ever assembled, yet it was presented as imagination and creativity rather than systematic espionage. The deception was so perfect that galactic intelligence services had dismissed these sources of information as harmless entertainment, while humans disseminated detailed intelligence about alien capabilities to their entire population through mass media. Director Yithara's investigation revealed even more disturbing patterns that challenged every assumption about human technological development and strategic planning. Her analysis of human technological progression showed advancement curves that defied every known model of civilization development, with leaps in capability that corresponded precisely with alien activity in their region of space. Human technological development doesn't follow standard evolutionary curves, she explained with the professional precision that had characterized her most significant intelligence briefings. Instead of gradual advancement from primitive to sophisticated, their progress shows sudden leaps that coincided exactly with known alien surveillance operations. The correlation was mathematically impossible to explain through coincidence or natural development. The development of radar technology had occurred within months of the first Corvashi deep space probes entering their solar system. Nuclear fission had been mastered immediately after Draconi power sources had been detected in nearby space. Computer technology had exploded into existence precisely when the Zenthari had begun monitoring human communications. Each technological breakthrough represented a direct response to alien presence, as if humans had been systematically reverse engineering alien technologies while maintaining the appearance of independent development. Each major technological breakthrough represents a direct response to alien observation, she continued, with the measured tone of someone presenting evidence that would reshape galactic understanding of human capabilities. They haven't been developing technology to improve their civilization. They've been developing countermeasures to neutralize ours. Now, the room temperature seemed to drop as the implications crystallized in the minds of delegates who had spent centuries believing in the technological superiority of established galactic civilizations. Human primitive technology wasn't primitive at all. It was specifically designed to appear non-threatening, while providing maximum defensive capability against galactic standard technologies. Their electromagnetic communication systems weren't backwards. They were hardened against the quantum disruption attacks that had crippled dozens of alien civilizations. Their kinetic weapons weren't crude. They were immune to the energy-dampening fields that rendered most modern weapons useless. Their industrial systems weren't inefficient. They were distributed and hardened to survive the orbital bombardment tactics that had ended resistance on countless worlds. Every aspect of human technology had been designed not for optimal performance under peaceful conditions, but for maximum effectiveness during conflict with technologically superior opponents. The defensive capabilities they had developed suggested intimate knowledge of alien attack methods and technologies that could only have been acquired through extensive intelligence operations or direct experience with alien warfare. Vexathani's final revelation shattered what remained of their assumptions about human capability and the scope of their long-term planning. Deep-range sensors had detected anomalous readings from Earth's ocean floors, massive metallic structures that shouldn't exist according to humanity's supposed industrial capacity, hidden beneath kilometers of water where orbital observation couldn't penetrate, and casual investigation would never discover them. Spectral analysis reveals construction materials that require industrial processes beyond anything in humanity's acknowledged technological arsenal, she announced with the solemnity of a funeral director delivering final arrangements. These structures generate energy signatures consistent with matter-antimatter reactors. They have been operational for at least 2 centuries, possibly longer. The underwater installations represented industrial capacity that rivaled the most advanced galactic civilizations, hidden beneath Earth's oceans, where they could operate without detection from space-based observation. The energy output suggested manufacturing capabilities that could produce fleets of spacecraft, weapon systems that could challenge galactic military forces, or technologies that exceeded anything in current databases. Most disturbing of all, the age of the installations indicated that humans had been operating advanced industrial facilities for far longer than official contact had even existed, suggesting preparation for conflicts that wouldn't occur for centuries after construction began. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced with the solemnity of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis to an entire civilization, "we are not looking at a primitive species attempting to reach the stars. We are looking at an advanced civilization that has been pretending to be primitive while systematically preparing for the day when we would finally notice them." The holographic display shifted to show real-time feeds from Earth's major population centers, their seemingly chaotic development suddenly revealing itself as carefully orchestrated illusion when viewed through the lens of systematic deception. What had once appeared to be chaotic urban sprawl now revealed itself as a carefully orchestrated defensive network designed to maximize survival and resistance during invasion scenarios. Building patterns that seemed random formed interconnected defensive networks when viewed from strategic analysis perspectives. Traffic flows that appeared inefficient were actually optimized for rapid evacuation of civilian populations or rapid deployment of military assets during crisis scenarios. Even human entertainment venues, stadiums, concert halls, gathering spaces were positioned and constructed to serve as communication hubs, supply distribution centers, or emergency shelter networks during extended siege operations. The civilian infrastructure that appeared primitive and inefficient was actually a sophisticated military support system disguised as normal urban development. "Every major city on Earth is a fortress," Admiral Keltherin observed, with grudging professional respect tinged by growing alarm at the scope of human preparation. "Every highway is a strategic corridor designed for rapid movement of military assets. Every building is positioned for maximum defensive value. They've turned their entire planet into a military installation while making it look like civilian infrastructure." The tactical implications were staggering. Earth wasn't a planet with military installations. It was a military installation disguised as a planet. Every aspect of human civilization had been designed and constructed to provide maximum defensive capability while maintaining the illusion of civilian normalcy. Such comprehensive militarization suggested preparation for conflicts on a scale that exceeded anything in galactic military planning, preparation that had been underway for centuries before the Council had even become aware of human existence. The final piece of evidence arrived as they watched. Real-time orbital tracking detected 17 human spacecraft leaving Earth's atmosphere simultaneously from different launch points around the globe. Not the slow, inefficient rockets they had been monitoring for decades, but sleek vessels moving with acceleration profiles that indicated artificial gravity and inertial dampening technology that officially didn't exist in human civilization. The launches occurred with precision timing that suggested coordination from a central command authority that possessed real-time awareness of galactic observation assets and had planned these departures to maximize intelligence value while minimizing defensive response time. The spacecraft themselves defied every assumption about human technological capabilities. Their hulls were constructed from materials that absorbed sensor probes rather than reflecting them, making detailed analysis impossible from standard observation distances. Their propulsion systems generated energy signatures that matched the most advanced galactic technologies while producing no exhaust signatures that would reveal their operational principles. Most disturbing of all, their trajectory patterns indicated destinations throughout the local galactic arm, suggesting not exploratory missions, but the activation of assets that had been pre-positioned for years or decades. The humans weren't just hiding their capabilities, they were actively deploying them with the confidence of a civilization that no longer feared detection. And they were doing it in broad daylight, as if they no longer cared who was watching, as if the time for concealment had ended and the time for action had begun. The Council had spent centuries observing what they thought was a primitive species struggling to survive on a backwater world. They had just discovered they were watching the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history, an operation that was about to transition from concealment to active implementation. And the implications of that transition would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy in ways that none of them were prepared to confront. The emergency protocols activated automatically as 17 human spacecraft achieved orbital velocity using technology that officially didn't exist in their civilization. Admiral Keltharin's tactical officers materialized as combat-ready holograms around the chamber, their faces bearing the hard expressions of military professionals confronting an enemy they had vastly underestimated. The chamber's defensive systems activated in response to the crisis, quantum-hardened barriers rising from the floor while point defense systems emerged from hidden compartments in the walls. Above them, the facility's shields activated with the distinctive hum of matter disruption fields that could withstand direct assault from antimatter weapons. Yet none of those defenses had been designed to counter an enemy that had spent centuries studying galactic military technology while remaining completely undetected. Fleet deployment status. Admiral Keltharin barked at his communications officer with the authority of someone who had commanded military forces across 47 different star systems. His neural implants glowed with the data flows from military networks that spanned the galaxy, networks that had apparently failed to detect the most significant military threat in recorded history. Draconi 7th Fleet, maintaining standard patrol positions in the Orion sector, Admiral. 12th Fleet, conducting routine exercises near the Vega system. Total combined strength, 847 vessels, including 23 dreadnoughts and 157 heavy cruisers. The numbers should have been reassuring. The humans had barely managed to put a few primitive stations in low orbit around their planet, according to official assessments. Even if their technological deception was as extensive as the evidence suggested, they couldn't possibly threaten military assets that had conquered half the galaxy through 4 centuries of continuous warfare. The Draconi fleets alone possessed enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems, while their combined forces could challenge any known military threat in galactic space. Yet something in the tactical displays made Admiral Keltharin's combat instincts scream warnings he couldn't rationally justify. The human spacecraft moving away from Earth showed acceleration profiles that suggested technologies equal to or superior to galactic standard military vessels. Their trajectories indicated not random exploration, but precise coordination toward strategic positions that would provide optimal oversight of galactic military assets. Each vessel was moving toward locations that would allow them to monitor major space lanes, military installations, and communication nodes throughout the local galactic arm. Zenthari intelligence assets. Director Yathara's response came with professional precision, tinged by growing uncertainty that reflected decades of intelligence work suddenly rendered obsolete by the scope of human deception. Monitor stations active across 1,147 systems. Deep space observation platforms maintaining surveillance on all major space lanes. Covert operatives embedded in 14 different species governing councils. She paused, accessing real-time data streams that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of systematic intelligence failure across every aspect of galactic security. Admiral, we're detecting massive electromagnetic disturbances across multiple sectors. Pattern suggests coordinated quantum link disruption on a scale that exceeds our theoretical models for such operations. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow, striking each delegate with the recognition that they were facing capabilities that challenged every assumption about galactic technology and strategic planning. Quantum link communication was the backbone of galactic civilization, enabling instantaneous contact across interstellar distances that made coordinated government and military operations possible across thousands of star systems. The technology was considered unbreachable, protected by quantum encryption that would require computational resources exceeding the industrial capacity of entire civilizations to crack. If someone was systematically disrupting those links, they could effectively blind the Council's intelligence networks and isolate military fleets from command authority, creating chaos that would make coordinated response impossible. Source of the disruption? Kelterin demanded, with the urgency of a military commander recognizing the opening moves of a campaign that threatened everything he had spent centuries defending. Ythera's manipulator arms danced across holographic interfaces, pulling data from monitoring stations throughout known space that were reporting anomalies beyond anything in their operational databases. Sir, the disruption pulses are originating from everywhere. Every major system we monitor is showing localized interference patterns that suggest the presence of previously undetected installations. The mathematical impossibility of coordinated multi-system disruption stunned the assembled representatives into silence. Such an operation would require a level of technological sophistication and strategic coordination that exceeded anything in the galactic database, representing an intelligence and military operation that dwarfed the largest campaigns in recorded history. The scope suggested not recent deployment, but infrastructure that had been carefully positioned over decades or centuries, hidden in plain sight, while providing capabilities that could challenge the entire structure of galactic civilization. Vexthani's voice cut through their shocked paralysis with the authority of someone who had spent centuries managing galactic bureaucracy and recognized the signs of systematic institutional failure. Admiral Director, we need to consider the possibility that this isn't the beginning of human expansion into space. This might be the end of their concealment phase. She activated archived surveillance data that none of them had thought to examine closely, background stellar observations from the past 3 centuries that had been dismissed as routine monitoring data. What they saw redefined their understanding of human capability and the scope of their long-term strategic planning. Subtle gravitational anomalies in 17 different star systems, all previously dismissed as natural phenomena or measurement errors. The anomalies were too small to trigger automatic investigation protocols, too distributed to suggest coordinated activity, and too consistent with known stellar mechanics to raise suspicion among routine analysts. But when viewed as coordinated evidence of massive construction projects, the anomalies painted a picture of industrial activity that had been carefully concealed for generations. Electromagnetic signatures in deep space that matched no known natural source, dismissed by previous analysts as equipment malfunction or atmospheric interference. The signatures were too weak to constitute clear evidence of artificial origin, too brief to trigger extended investigation, and too scattered to suggest systematic activity. Yet, when compiled and analyzed as evidence of coordinated operations, they revealed the presence of massive artificial structures using stealth technology beyond current galactic understanding. Most terrifying of all, quantum fluctuation patterns that suggested the presence of massive artificial structures using stealth technology that exceeded the theoretical capabilities of established galactic civilizations. The patterns had been detected by routine monitoring equipment for over 2 centuries, but their artificial nature had been masked by sophisticated deception that made them appear to be natural quantum phenomena. "They're not hiding on Earth," she continued, with the measured tone of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis to an entire civilization. "They've been building infrastructure throughout this entire region of space for centuries. While we thought we were monitoring a primitive planet, they were constructing what appears to be a network of hidden installations that rivals the infrastructure of our most advanced civilizations. The tactical map updated in real time, showing the scope of human deception with mathematical precision that left no room for doubt or denial. Red indicators marked probable construction sites in over 40 systems within 100 light-years of Earth, each representing industrial capacity that should have been impossible to conceal from galactic monitoring networks. Blue indicators showed gravitational anomalies that suggested massive hidden structures, installations that could serve as military bases, industrial complexes, or research facilities that had operated undetected for generations. Green indicators marked electromagnetic signatures that could only originate from industrial complexes or military installations, revealing the presence of an infrastructure network that spanned dozens of star systems. The humans hadn't just been hiding their planetary capabilities, they had been secretly colonizing space while maintaining the illusion of being trapped on a single world. The scope of the deception suggested organizational capabilities that exceeded those of most established galactic civilizations, strategic planning that operated on timescales that dwarfed normal political and military planning cycles, and technological capabilities that challenged the supremacy of species that had dominated galactic politics for millennia. Admiral Kelterin studied the tactical display with the expression of a warrior recognizing the magnitude of his strategic failure and the scope of the enemy he now faced. Estimates on total human assets? His tactical AI processed the available data with ruthless efficiency that had characterized draconian military analysis for 4 centuries. Based on detectable signatures and extrapolated construction capacity, estimated human space-based population between 50 and 200 million individuals, estimated industrial capacity equivalent to a Class 7 galactic civilization, estimated military assets unknown but consistent with threat level Alpha Prime. Class 7 civilizations controlled multiple star systems and possessed the industrial base to construct planet-killing weapons, fleet-based military forces, and technological research programs that could challenge established galactic powers. Alpha Prime threats were capable of challenging the Council's combined military might through superior technology, strategic positioning, or alliance structures that exceeded normal threat assessment categories. The humans had achieved both classifications while successfully convincing the galaxy they could barely escape their own atmosphere, representing a deception operation that exceeded anything in military or intelligence history. The tactical implications were staggering. Humanity possessed not only the industrial capacity to challenge galactic civilization, but had demonstrated the strategic sophistication to conceal such capabilities for centuries, while positioning themselves for optimal advantage when concealment was no longer necessary. Director Yathara's intelligence networks were delivering information that shattered every remaining assumption about human intentions and the scope of their strategic planning. Communications intercepts from human fiction broadcasts show systematic discussion of galactic political structures, military tactics, and technological vulnerabilities, she announced with the professional calm that had characterized her most serious threat assessments. They're not entertaining their population. They're conducting strategic briefings disguised as entertainment. She displayed examples that chilled the assembled representatives to their core, evidence of intelligence dissemination that exceeded the sophistication of any known military training program. Human entertainment programs that accurately described Council military doctrines, political thrillers that revealed classified intelligence operations with precision that suggested access to highly classified information, and war movies that demonstrated intimate knowledge of alien weapons systems and their tactical weaknesses. The entertainment industry that galactic observers had dismissed as primitive storytelling was actually the most sophisticated intelligence briefing system ever devised, disseminating strategic information to civilian populations through mass media that appeared to be fictional entertainment. Every human civilian has been receiving military intelligence briefings disguised as entertainment for over a century, she continued, with growing alarm at the implications for galactic security. Their entire population has been trained to recognize alien technologies, understand galactic political dynamics, and respond appropriately to contact scenarios. The scope of the preparation defied comprehension. Not only had the humans been systematically studying galactic civilization while hiding their own development, they had been preparing their entire species for eventual contact. Every human on Earth possessed intelligence about alien capabilities that most Council citizens couldn't access. Every human had been educated in the politics, technology, and vulnerabilities of species they had supposedly never encountered. The civilian population that appeared primitive and unprepared for galactic contact was actually the most thoroughly briefed population in known space, prepared for scenarios that most galactic civilizations had never considered. The level of preparation suggested not defensive paranoia, but comprehensive strategic planning for eventual transition from concealment to active participation in galactic politics. Vexthani's final revelation completed the picture of human preparation with evidence that challenged every assumption about the biological limitations of their species. Genetic analysis from our archived biological samples shows systematic modification to human DNA over the past 8 centuries, she announced, with the gravity of someone presenting evidence that redefined their understanding of human capabilities. Enhanced radiation resistance, improved cognitive processing speed, accelerated healing factors, and extended lifespans. They've been biologically adapting their species for space-based existence while maintaining surface appearances of standard human physiology. The genetic modifications were too sophisticated to be natural evolution, too systematic to be random mutation, and too extensive to be the result of primitive medical technology. The humans had been systematically improving their biological capabilities while concealing such improvements from external observation, creating a population that was physically and mentally adapted for spacefaring existence while appearing to remain bound by the biological limitations of their original form. The scope of such genetic modification suggested not only advanced biotechnology, but also long-term planning that spanned centuries, with each generation receiving improvements that prepared them for eventual transition to space-based civilization. The assembled representatives sat in stunned silence as the magnitude of human planning became clear. This wasn't opportunistic deception or defensive paranoia. This was a civilization-wide operation spanning centuries, involving genetic modification, technological development, infrastructure construction, population education, and strategic intelligence gathering on a scale that dwarfed anything in recorded galactic history. The humans hadn't been hiding from galactic civilization. They had been studying it, preparing for it, and positioning themselves to fundamentally alter the balance of power when they chose to reveal themselves. And that moment had arrived with mathematical precision that suggested every aspect of their emergence had been planned generations in advance. Admiral Keltharin's tactical assessment carried the weight of professional military judgment honed by 4 centuries of interstellar warfare and strategic planning. Threat evaluation: immediate. Scope: existential. Recommendation: emergency deployment of all available assets. The chamber's atmosphere processors cycled audibly as representatives from 37 species processed the implications of total mobilization against an enemy that had been preparing for such response far longer than they had been aware of its existence. Such orders hadn't been issued since the Quantum Wars 3 millennia ago. conflicts that had reshaped galactic civilization and established the current balance of power that the humans now threaten to overturn. The emergency deployment protocols activated military assets across the galaxy, scrambling fleets that had maintained peaceful patrol patterns for centuries, and activating defensive systems that had never been tested against enemies with detailed knowledge of their capabilities and weaknesses. Director Yithara's intelligence update painted an even grimmer picture of immediate tactical threats that challenged every assumption about response time and strategic positioning. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy buildups at multiple points throughout human space. Whatever they're preparing to do, it's happening now, with coordination that suggests central command authority and real-time communication across interstellar distances. The tactical display updated with real-time feeds that showed the true extent of human preparation for this exact scenario. Structures emerging from what had appeared to be empty space, their stealth systems deactivating in coordinated sequence that revealed infrastructure networks spanning dozens of star systems. Space-based installations the size of small moons materializing near strategic systems, their appearances timed to maximize psychological impact while demonstrating technological capabilities that exceeded galactic standards. Most terrifying of all, energy signatures that suggested weapons platforms capable of targeting objects across interstellar distances, representing firepower that could threaten major installations throughout the local galactic arm. The humans weren't just revealing their capabilities, they were demonstrating them with precision that suggested intimate knowledge of galactic defensive systems and strategic vulnerabilities. "My God," whispered Ambassador Thekvar of the Kovashi hegemony, speaking for the first time since the session began, with the horror of someone recognizing the scope of their civilization's vulnerability. "How long have they been ready for this?" Vexthani accessed the deepest archives, cross-referencing human activities with galactic historical records in search of the timeline that would explain the scope and sophistication of human preparation. The answer she found redefined their understanding of the strategic patience and planning capability that humanity possessed. Based on construction timelines and strategic positioning, the humans have been ready to reveal themselves for at least 2 centuries, she announced with the weight of someone delivering evidence of the longest-running deception in galactic history. "They've been waiting for us to make the first move, allowing us to provide the justification they needed for active operations." The implications struck the assembly like a quantum torpedo, redefining every aspect of the crisis they faced. The Council's decision to downgrade Earth hadn't triggered human action. It had provided them with the justification they had been patiently waiting for through generations of careful preparation. Every human response, every tactical deployment, every technological revelation had been planned and prepared decades in advance, waiting for the moment when galactic civilization would provide them with moral and legal justification for abandoning their concealment. They weren't reacting to Council decisions. They had been manipulating the Council into making the exact decisions that would justify their emergence while providing them with maximum strategic advantage. The scope of such manipulation suggested not only superior intelligence gathering, but also predictive capabilities that allowed them to influence galactic politics across generational timescales. Admiral Keltharin activated emergency fleet protocols as reports flooded in from across the galaxy, each message confirming the scope of human preparation and the sophistication of their strategic positioning. All Draconi fleets, immediate tactical alert. Zenthari intelligence assets, priority surveillance on human-adjacent systems, Kovashi diplomatic corps, prepare for potential first contact scenarios under crisis conditions. But even as he issued orders with the authority of centuries of military command, the Admiral realized they were responding to a crisis that had been carefully orchestrated by their supposed enemy. The humans had maneuvered the Council into a position where military response was inevitable, diplomatic contact was impossible, and strategic surprise belonged entirely to Earth. Every aspect of the crisis favored human strategic objectives while placing galactic civilization at maximum disadvantage, suggesting manipulation that exceeded anything in military or political history. "Sir," his communications officer reported, with barely controlled panic that reflected the shock of professional military personnel confronting capabilities they had never anticipated. "We're receiving a transmission from the Sol system. Source, Earth Orbital Platform. Message format, Standard Galactic Diplomatic Protocol. Authority level, Planetary Government." The chamber fell silent as they realized the humans were about to make official contact using protocols they shouldn't know, from installations they shouldn't have been able to build, with authority structures that implied their civilization had been ready for this moment for generations. The sophistication of their approach suggested not desperate improvisation, but careful preparation for diplomatic contact under exactly these circumstances. Director Yathara's final intelligence report confirmed their worst fears about the scope of human strategic planning and their intentions for galactic civilization. The transmission is being broadcast simultaneously to every major system in this galactic arm. They're not just contacting us, they're announcing themselves to every species within 5,000 light years. The message began with words that would echo through galactic history. "Greetings to the Galactic Council. We are ready to begin formal negotiations." Admiral Keltherin stared at the tactical display, showing human assets throughout known space, their careful concealment ending as they revealed capabilities that challenged every assumption about galactic power structures and technological supremacy. The Council had tried to downgrade a primitive backwater and discovered they were facing the most sophisticated political and military operation in recorded galactic history. Instead, they had awakened a civilization that had been preparing for this moment longer than most Council species had been spacefaring. A civilization that had studied their weaknesses while concealing strengths that could reshape the balance of galactic power. As human spacecraft moved into formation around strategic systems throughout the local galactic arm, Admiral Keltherin realized that the balance of power in the galaxy was about to change forever. The humans hadn't been hiding because they were weak. They had been hiding because they were gathering strength for the day when they would no longer need to hide, when they could emerge with capabilities that would force galactic civilization to accept them as equals or face the consequences of treating them as enemies. That day had arrived with precision timing that suggested every aspect of their emergence had been planned for generations, and the galaxy was completely unprepared for what humanity was about to reveal. The transmission from Earth continued with diplomatic precision that chilled every representative in the chamber, delivered by a human speaker whose knowledge of galactic politics exceeded that of most Council members. The human speaker, identifying herself as Director of External Affairs Lysandra Hawthorne, addressed the Council with intimate knowledge of their political structures, military capabilities, and individual psychological profiles that suggested intelligence-gathering operations spanning decades or centuries. Her voice carried the confidence of someone speaking from a position of strength, backed by capabilities that had remained hidden until the moment of maximum strategic advantage. "We acknowledge the Council's recent classification review regarding our world," she began, with diplomatic language that transformed routine bureaucracy into the opening moves of a new era in galactic politics. "We appreciate the opportunity this provides to discuss our actual capabilities and intentions." Her words carried subtle implications that transformed the entire framework of galactic diplomacy. By referring to the classification review as an opportunity, she revealed that the humans had been monitoring Council internal proceedings with sophisticated intelligence capabilities and had manipulated them into providing the exact justification Earth needed to abandon its careful concealment. The bureaucratic decision that had seemed routine to council representatives had been anticipated and planned for by human strategists who had shaped events to serve their purposes. Director Yithara's analysis confirmed the strategic brilliance of human timing and their manipulation of galactic political processes. "She's not requesting admission to galactic civilization," she announced with growing recognition of the scope of human ambitions. "She's announcing Earth's intention to restructure it according to their vision." The implications cascaded through every level of council authority like a quantum cascade failure, threatening to destabilize governmental structures that had maintained galactic order for over 3 millennia. For 3,000 years, the existing species had maintained galactic order through careful balance of military power, economic control, and diplomatic precedent that had prevented major conflicts while ensuring stability across thousands of star systems. A new civilization with capabilities rivaling their combined assets threatened to destabilize everything, challenging not only their military supremacy, but their fundamental assumptions about how galactic civilization should be organized and governed. Lysandra Hawthorne's next words confirmed their fears, while revealing the scope of human preparation for exactly this scenario. "We've observed the Council's governance methods for several centuries and have identified numerous opportunities for improvement. We're prepared to discuss systematic reforms that would benefit all spacefaring civilizations." The language was diplomatic, but the implications were revolutionary. Ambassador Thekvar's compound eyes widened in recognition of the diplomatic language being employed and its implications for existing power structures. "She's offering to reorganize galactic government, with themselves as the dominant partner," he realized with the horror of someone whose species had dominated galactic politics for over 2 millennia. Admiral Keltherin's tactical displays showed why such confidence wasn't unfounded, revealing strategic positioning that suggested wargaming scenarios the Council had never considered and preparation for conflicts they had never anticipated. Human assets were positioned throughout strategic systems with mathematical precision that indicated not random exploration, but systematic preparation for control of critical infrastructure. Their installations controlled key space lanes that connected major civilizations. Their weapons platforms could interdict commerce between major worlds, and their intelligence networks appeared to have infiltrated every aspect of galactic civilization. The positioning was too perfect to be accidental, too comprehensive to be recent, and too sophisticated to be the work of a primitive civilization. "They're not asking to join our system," he realized with growing dread at the military implications. "They're demanding we join theirs." The scope of human preparation became clear as Earth's transmission continued with detailed proposals for restructuring galactic civilization that demonstrated knowledge of classified information and strategic thinking that exceeded anything in governmental databases. They presented comprehensive analyses of trade inefficiencies that revealed intimate knowledge of commercial relationships between species, military vulnerabilities that exposed classified strategic information, and diplomatic failures that demonstrated detailed understanding of internal council politics. More disturbing still, they offered solutions that demonstrated strategic thinking beyond anything in the galactic database, proposing governmental reforms that address genuine problems while positioning Earth at the center of reformed galactic authority. Lysandra Hawthorne's voice maintained diplomatic courtesy while delivering ultimatums disguised as invitations, using language that forced the Council to choose between cooperation and confrontation. "We've identified 17 major systemic inefficiencies in current galactic governance. Our proposed reforms would increase economic productivity by 43% while reducing military conflicts by an estimated 67%. The mathematics were impossible to argue with, supported by analytical models that demonstrated superior understanding of galactic economics and political dynamics. Human proposals addressed genuine problems that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia. Trade disputes that wasted resources, territorial conflicts that disrupted development, and diplomatic inefficiencies that prevented optimal cooperation between species. But the solutions all involved transferring significant authority to human administrative oversight, effectively placing Earth at the center of reformed galactic government while reducing existing council powers to advisory roles. The reforms weren't designed to destroy galactic civilization, but to perfect it under human guidance, creating a system that would be more efficient, more peaceful, and more prosperous, but also more centralized under Earth's control. Vexitani realized the true horror of their situation with the clarity of someone who had spent centuries managing galactic bureaucracy and recognized the signs of systematic institutional replacement. "They didn't study our civilization to understand us," she announced with professional horror at the scope of human ambitions. "They studied it to improve us. They intend to rule us for our own good." The benevolent totalitarianism implicit in human proposals represented a threat more subtle and dangerous than military conquest, challenging not only galactic freedom, but the fundamental right of species to govern themselves according to their own values and traditions. They weren't planning to destroy galactic civilization. They were planning to perfect it under their guidance, imposing efficiency and peace through centralized control that would eliminate the messy democracy and chaotic freedom that had characterized galactic politics for millennia. And their centuries of preparation suggested they possessed the capability to implement their vision, whether the Council cooperated or not, making resistance futile and cooperation a matter of survival rather than choice. Director Ythara's intelligence networks detected the activation of human assets throughout known space with coordination that suggested real-time command and control capabilities spanning interstellar distances. Not weapons or military installations, but administrative centers, diplomatic facilities, and governance structures that had been hidden in plain sight for decades, waiting for the moment when concealment would no longer be necessary. The humans hadn't been building a military to conquer the galaxy. They had been constructing a shadow government to replace existing authority with administrative efficiency that would make resistance impractical and cooperation inevitable. "They're not planning invasion," she announced with professional horror at the scope of human preparation and the sophistication of their approach to galactic conquest. "They're planning administration." The distinction was crucial. Military conquest could be resisted, defeated, or reversed through conventional warfare and diplomatic alliance. Administrative takeover was far more subtle and dangerous, replacing existing systems with more efficient alternatives that made resistance appear irrational and cooperation beneficial. The chamber erupted in panicked communications as representatives realized the scope of human preparation and their complete lack of defensive options against such sophisticated political warfare. Every major system contained human installations ready to assume governmental functions with efficiency that would exceed existing administrative capabilities. Every crucial space lane was monitored by human intelligence assets that could control commerce and communication between species. Every diplomatic relationship had been studied, analyzed, and prepared for optimal management under human guidance that would reduce conflicts while increasing prosperity. The humans had prepared not just to challenge galactic civilization, but to replace it with something better, making resistance appear selfish and destructive, while cooperation promised benefits that exceeded anything existing governments could provide. Admiral Keltheran's military assessment painted a picture of strategic inevitability that professional warriors understood with visceral clarity. They've achieved perfect positioning for a simultaneous transition of power. No military response would be effective against assets this widely distributed and deeply embedded in galactic infrastructure. The humans had spent centuries studying galactic civilization, not as outsiders seeking admission, but as future administrators preparing to assume control when existing systems proved inadequate. Their concealment hadn't been defensive. It had been preparatory, allowing them to position assets and gather intelligence while existing governments remained unaware of the administrative revolution being prepared. They had hidden their capabilities until they were ready to implement solutions to problems the Council didn't even know existed, offering improvements that would be difficult to refuse even as they transferred power from existing governments to human oversight. Lysandra Hawthorne's transmission concluded with words that would haunt galactic history, delivered with the confidence of someone whose civilization had prepared for this moment across multiple generations. We understand this represents a significant transition. We are prepared to implement reforms gradually, with full consultation and cooperation from existing governmental structures. We believe this approach will minimize disruption while maximizing benefits for all species. The diplomatic language couldn't disguise the reality that had become clear to every representative in the chamber. Earth was offering the Council a choice between voluntary cooperation and involuntary replacement. Their centuries of preparation had created a situation where resistance would be futile and cooperation would be survival, where the only rational choice was to accept human guidance or face the consequences of opposing a civilization that had studied their weaknesses while concealing strengths that could reshape galactic power. Vexthani stared at the tactical display, showing human assets throughout known space, their careful concealment ending as they revealed administrative capabilities that dwarfed anything in galactic history. The Council had tried to downgrade a primitive backwater and discovered they were facing the most sophisticated governmental takeover in the history of spacefaring civilization, a transition that had been planned and prepared across generations while existing governments remained completely unaware of their approaching obsolescence. As human diplomatic vessels moved into standard orbits around every major Council world, requesting permission to establish embassies that would function as transition centers for the administrative revolution, the assembled representatives realized that the age of Council governance was ending, not through war or conquest, but through the emergence of a civilization that had been preparing to inherit galactic leadership for longer than most species had been aware of their existence, offering improvements that would be difficult to refuse even as they transformed the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. The humans had been ready to rule the galaxy before the Council had even noticed they existed. And now they were ready to begin the most comprehensive political transformation in recorded history, whether the galaxy chose to cooperate or resist. The age of human concealment was over. The age of human administration was about to begin. The galaxy would never be the same again, and every species would have to choose between embracing the future humanity offered or facing the consequences of opposing the most sophisticated civilization in known space. In the end, the choice was simple: evolve under human guidance or become irrelevant in a galaxy that no longer had room for inefficient governance. The humans had been patient for centuries, but their patience was ending, and their emergence would reshape everything. They had been ready to rule the stars since before the Council knew they could reach them.